In what was a historic weekend in the NFL, a historic day in the markets, and now a historic moment for LD Micro, our next presenter is tackling some of the biggest issues in society today. A name that is synonymous with robotic security and fighting crime, a name that will be getting a lot more coverage in the weeks, months, and years ahead. Based out of Mountain View, California, Knightscope is an advanced security technology company that builds fully autonomous security robots that deter, detect, and report. Their motto is to build a safer future, one robot at a time. Joining us on the call today, it is my privilege and pleasure to welcome the chairman and CEO, Mr. Bill Santana Lee. Bill, it feels like yesterday that you and I spoke. That was back in September of 2020. Thank you for giving our community an overview. And for everyone who's tuning in, we're going to do something a little bit different. One of my favorite shows is How I Built This with Guy Raz. It's an NPR podcast. And what Guy does is he basically goes to successful entrepreneurs to kind of learn about their origins, where they're from, where they were raised, the companies that they built, and all the trials and tribulations that they had to get to this point. So I know, Bill, we know each other personally. I know that you've had to go through a lot just to sit in that chair right now. So I wanted to kind of go back to learning about, your background, where you grew up, what type of jobs you had, what type of training you had to ultimately be the chairman and CEO of Knightscope, and to ultimately provide in my eyes, a product that will change the world for the better.
Well, thanks for doing this, Chris. Good to see you again. I don't know what trials and tribulations you're talking about. It's been smooth sailing for 8 years in building Knightscope. You know how I built it, super easy. Just download from the cloud. Everything just happens. Super easy.
Well, look, the stance is that a lot of people who are entrepreneurs, just like a lot of investors, did not have kind of the traditional upbringing where, you were born to a wealthy family, you went to a good school, you interned at AG Edwards, and then you got your first job. In many aspects, like what I'm doing right now is all completely by accident. It's just I'm that, but it is who it is how we are shaped that ultimately makes that big difference. So I'm curious, were you a SoCal guy? Were you a NorCal guy? What was growing up like with you?
Neither. I was born in New York City. Um, my first interaction with crime was when I was 5 years old. We got robbed, and my dad said, "Okay, that's enough of that. We're moving." So we moved to what some would consider a suburb of New York, would be Stamford, Connecticut, and that's where I grew up. My mom was a nurse's aide. My dad was the inventory manager at Greenwich Country Club, and I still, Chris, honestly, I think I made more money as an intern than both of them combined. And I don't know how they had, got ends to meet, but I had a nice upbringing. And then my cousins decided it would be a good idea for me to go to summer school. So after my sophomore year in high school, they got me out here to Berkeley, California, to go to class. And at the time, I don't know if you know this, I used to have like really long hair. I was in a band, playing guitar and stuff. And well, actually, I think I did share that with
No,
you.
I do know now. Absolutely. That was one of the most surprising things I've seen in a long time. But
So I'm like 16 years old, sitting in the general astronomy class with actual like college students in the back, and they're like, "Who's the kid?"
right.
But because I didn't come from a wealthy family, I thought if I would go to school during the summers, I could graduate a year early. So I went to Berkeley first after sophomore, and then after junior in high school, I went to Yale, and then did a summer or two at Carnegie Mellon, and then graduated Carnegie a year early. I was a complete wreck. Don't get me wrong. I think I had four hardcore electrical engineering classes and two hardcore mechanical as my last semester. And when I joined Ford, I was literally shaking for 30 days after, just trying to like, did I graduate or not? But it was not easy. Not easy.
Well, I think it's interesting that you came to the West Coast and then you essentially went back close to home at Yale, and then you decided, with all your infinite wisdom, that you wanted to go to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania,
Exactly.
which is kind of an interesting town to say the least. But what was that? Why was that? Why did you make that transition? Was there something at Cal that you felt like you weren't getting? Because usually when people come to Cal, they either completely drop out and never go back to college, or they stay and they're miserable for all 4 years.
I had this fascination with cars, to be honest. It's one of the industries where like everything comes together. Brand, finance, manufacturing, supply chain, marketing, everything comes together, design, and then you have this awesome product at the end that you have an emotional attachment to. And I kind of fell in love with that. So I think the year before I graduated, I wanted to get an internship at an automaker. And I remember like sending 58 or 68 resumes out and got like rejections or no response from everybody except my top pick. I got two offers from Ford Motor Company. And I busted my butt that summer and I promised myself, I said, all right, I really want to work here. I'm going to worked so hard this summer. There's no way they would not hire me back. And almost like an idiot, I didn't recruit with any other potential employers my last year of college. And then my old boss called me back and said, "Hey, I've got an opening," and I got back to Detroit.
So, I mean, so you graduated from Carnegie. So that's kind of weird. So you got your degree from Carnegie Mellon University, right?
Hmm?
That's kind of, so that's kind of, so you went 2 years. I'm assuming you get your degree from whoever the last college is, and you decided to go to Detroit to to intern at Ford. What did you specifically do at Ford?
For the internship,
Yes.
was nuts. I was doing competitive analysis of ignition systems. They literally handed me keys to a Corvette, a Saab, a town car. I don't know. It was like six cars that I drove for the summer, just basically putting them through the paces, deep soaking them in the cold, doing the heat stuff and making sure the thing will start. I mean, there's all kinds of funny stories, but basically, I got to drive a bunch of crazy cars on the test track the whole summer, which was my day job. And then at night, I went to headquarters and asked the treasurer's office to give me all the annual reports. So I come back to the office and I had like a whole stack from 1970 whatever on my desk, and my boss comes over. He's like, "What the hell are you doing?" I'm like, "Well, I'm trying to understand what the hell happened to all the market share and why is their balance sheet all messed up,
Oh yeah.
and we need to kind of figure this out." And he's just like, "This kid's a lunatic." So one funny story, when they did give me the offer to join full time the following year, they gave me a signing bonus, and I refused the bonus. And the HR guys and my boss are like, "You're refusing the signing bonus?" I'm like, "Yeah. Did you not read the shareholder report? Like the annual report? Have you looked at your balance sheet? You can't be sending this stuff out." And so I returned the check to them. And not until I left did I know what they did to compensate for that, I guess. So they didn't cash the check, but they changed my tenure by like 6 months or a year, so that I would be seen as starting a little bit earlier. That would help with the related pension and stuff. It was crazy.
Well, I was going to say, I guess in any big multinational corporation, just give the interns the hardest problems that the company has and see how they deal with it. Do you feel like there was any rhyme or reason as to why they put you there, or it was just destiny?
My boss told me why he hired me. He says, "Okay, well, Carnegie Mellon, at the time and still today is pretty good school, especially in electrical engineering." But what I wrote in the letter, I'm like, "No matter what you do, whatever you pay me, I will always do double or triple of whatever you end up paying me. So you will need to hire me," something to that effect in a little bit more
Right.
eloquent way. So he's like, "Okay, well, this person thinks they're gonna make a big impact. So, well, let's roll and see what happens."
How long did you stay at Ford?
10 years, whole
Wow.
decade. Yeah, if you go on my LinkedIn profile during those years, I look unemployable. I mean, it's basically a new job every 6 or 12 months. And I kept getting promoted or double promoted and kind of, I mean, I'm eternally grateful. Ford was an awesome training ground, especially for what I'm doing right now. And I got to see almost every facet of the company and over a span of a decade on 4 different continents, actually.
Did you work with anyone that had a big hand in Ford versus Ferrari? Because I know a lot of people have not seen the movie, but that actually did happen.
Oh,
Uh,
that was years prior. That was years prior.
well, I was going to say, were there anyone there that was involved in that you kind of got some tutelage from?
No, not really. In that entire, pretty much the entire regime's gone. Everybody that I knew at the time.
Did you stay in Detroit for the full 10 years?
I was based in Detroit. I was back and forth to Japan working with Mazda. I was stationed in London for working with Ford of Europe. I worked for Ford of Brazil and didn't go, but I worked for Ford of India for some time as well.
What made you ultimately decide that you didn't want to work for Ford anymore?
I think it was a combination of 2 or 3 things. One, my last name isn't Ford. Um, Two, um, I used to, and this is a little sad thing to say, I used to look up to all those folks that were, you know, vice presidents or group vice presidents, and I got promoted so quickly. When I was 28, I was the youngest senior executive at Ford. And
Wow.
so I ended up spending a lot of time with them. And I realized, like, you guys don't actually do any work. You go from one meeting to another meeting and you're just parroting stuff from one to another. And then when it comes decision time, no one wants to stick their neck out and actually do anything. I used to run my career kind of like, you're going to promote me today or you're going to fire me. And I'm going to force you to pick. A couple of times I almost got fired. But I ran really hard. And they kept giving me chances. So I'm certainly grateful. And I think the last gig where I built a subsidiary for Ford, that gave me the entrepreneurial bug. So that probably was the tipping point.
I will say this though. I mean, fast forward to today, they have made, in my eyes, Ford is advancing cars because they have several designs that are beautiful. They're moving the electric, I think it's called the Ford Lightning, the F-150 that is electric. I just feel like out of all the car makers, they have the best breadth of product. Do you feel that, I mean, do you agree with this? Or, I mean, do you think something fundamentally changed there? Or they just got sick and tired of designing really ugly sedans?
Actually, Chris, I mean, the other reason, just thinking about it, like the other reason I left was I can't fix this. Even if you handed me the keys, you've got a flawed balance sheet with a bunch of pension liability that I don't know how you're ever going to pay down. You can never cover your cost of capital. You're basically covering all your sins with 1 or 2 vehicle lines. You got a flawed distribution network. You market the vehicle 4, 5, 6 times before you even sell it. I mean, you know, lots of problems. So, you know,
Last question.
I would love, I've had chance to literally start over.
Well, I was going to say, did they ever, I mean, do executives actually get free Fords or you just get it at a discount?
A little bit of both. What was weird is like when I was still single at the time. So when you get senior enough, I think they would give me, I've lost track now. I think it was 3 or 4 cars to my name a year. And I'm like, okay, I can't do it. So I think I gave one to my parents, and then they allowed me to get a new car every 6 months, which is really bad. It's highly addictive. Like you get a new car every 6 months is not a good thing to start because trying to give it up is a problem.
Listen, I'm pretty sure it wasn't an escort that you got or a
No, too many Mustangs, too many Mustangs.
no, look, look, my stance is you kind of moved up rank and you decided this was not for you. You wanted more flexibility. Then what happened after fourth?
I actually got recruited out here to Silicon Valley during the dot-com madness. So SoftBank Venture Capital wanted to do something in the automotive space. Then I worked on a few kind of startups to try to get things going in the auto space. And then in 2013 is kind of when we founded Knightscope.
So when you moved to Silicon Valley, rents were still outrageous.
Yeah, yeah. I moved 99, I think. Yeah.
Is there any similarities to what you experienced during the dot-com boom and today? Because I think that both of them are, I was a little bit younger, but both of them are eerily similar.
A little bit, and then not much. So back then, like literally, I raised $5 million on a 12 slide PowerPoint, and the only question the general partner had at the end is, why haven't we closed yet? Like there was
Wow.
very little diligence. There's no real business models. Now there's still a lot of stupid stuff that gets funded, but a little bit more disciplined. And you got to get further along than you were before. I think the other massive difference is these numbers may be a year or two off, but about $130 billion gets dumped into startups every year. Here in the Valley, maybe 25 or more percent is actually corporate venture capital. And so now you've got like a strong foundation of investment that's not just going to disappear overnight, right? A lot of major corporations have set up a shop here, and that doesn't go the ebb and flow based on someone's whatever panic they're having.
Well, I was going to say, I heard this from somewhere, so it must be true. There are now 1,000 unicorns or private companies with valuations of greater than $1 billion. And if you look at $1,000 billion companies, you get a trillion in market capitalization or valuation. So the only big difference for me and the dot-com boom was in the dot-com boom, companies would give out a lot of free stuff. You don't really have that anymore.
You do
So
it a different way, Chris. You do it a different way. It's called liquidation preferences. I can give you whatever BS valuation you want, but if you can guarantee me 2x or 3x my money no matter what the hell happens, if you go under or not, like I'll
right.
do this deal all day long. Of course there are 1,000 unicorns. I mean, seriously.
But to me, Bill, I mean, it's always, look, the stance is it always ends badly. Okay. Because you know as well as I do that most of these guys are not going to survive.
Well, that's the business model, Chris. I mean, there's 20,000, 22,000 startups here in Silicon Valley. Literally 95% of them are going to fail. Like, that's not me making that up. That's kind of what happens. And that's the business model for most venture capitalists.
Was there ever a time that when you just moved down to, Silicon Valley that you look back and said, you know what, maybe I should have kept that Ford job?
There's two things. No, and there's two things I miss a lot. Um, my past my credentials would get me into every design studio, and I would love, and it's one of the best parts of my job at Knightscope that I get a chance and privilege to work with our chief design officer, Aaron Lenhart, and him and I have been working together since I don't know, it's probably 2 decades now, and to be able to walk into a studio and just see what's coming in 2, 3, 4, 5, or 10 years. I used to do the rounds, like instead of taking a coffee break or going to lunch or whatever, I'd go to like a half a dozen studios as my break and just go pop in and see the designers and see what's going on. I miss that a lot. The other thing I miss is in some of my jobs at Ford, I used to lose $1 billion in rounding, like I don't know, 4.5 billion. No, four, 6, and it was not a big deal. Like literally move hundreds of millions of dollars or $1 billion with one move of an Excel spreadsheet. And like in the real world, like $1 billion is kind of a meaningful amount of capital. And
Or
having the discretionary resources, when I was there, if I remember correctly, it was something like $300 million a year was wasted on stop start new product development stuff. Just cancel that, start that. No, cancel that. No, that was good. Keep going. And it was just literally $300 million just burned. And in the real world, that it's kind of meaningful capital. So not having the resources is certainly a miss a lot.
For sure. So it was a SoftBank venture that you were a part of, or you worked at SoftBank?
No, I was the number two employee for a company that they wanted to start, which is called Model E. It was to pioneer the subscription service. Like there's companies today messing around with how do I include the insurance, the fuel, everything in the car, and you can just subscribe to it. We were doing that in 1999.
Yeah, I think the company that did it, was it called Metro Mile? Something like.
There's more than a handful, I think, that have tried it. I think one of the big problems is most people don't realize how much they pay every month. So you got this little bit of sticker shock, right? There's the car payment, then there's the insurance, then there's the fuel and the maintenance and everything. It's like, oh my God, this actually adds up to a lot of money. And if you put it on one bill, people get queasy.
And you forgot license and registration, which is going
Yep.
up every single year in the state of California.
Yep. 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 Yep.
Okay, so you did that, and then what happened right before Nightscope?
Uh, so a bit after 9/11, I got a unsolicited email from a law enforcement officer. And he said, listen, we're literally dying out here. There's a 500,000 law enforcement vehicles, and they're not really cop cars. They're rent-a-cars with lights and sirens and stuff velcroed and crazy glued. None of them will pass a crash test, and this is awful. Like, you never put a soldier in one of these things. Like, I don't know why we're having to drive this stuff. Can you help me build a purpose-built law enforcement vehicle?
Wow.
And it was after 9/11, and I'm like, someone hit my town. I'm still really pissed off about it. So at that time, I decided I was going to dedicate the rest of my life to better securing our country. Um, and so, people like get all excited about the public listing and everything else. I'm like, it's just the financing. Like all we're trying to do is achieve a mission here. And, we worked on that for 10 plus years, try to get it off the ground. And we had a little bit of a debacle at the end with the U.S. federal government.
Well, I was going to add 9/11. When we went to war in Iraq and Afghanistan, one of the big problems that we had were the enemies were basically using IEDs and blowing up these Humvees. And there was actually a company out of South Carolina called Force Protection
Yep.
that built a much more stronger, heavily armored, tactical, like Humvee for the troops. And in many ways, that kind of changed the battle, because now these guys can go over IEDs and survive.
So you're making my point without knowing it. So that's the problem. Right there, that little story is the crux of the problem. We give our soldiers, the 2 million plus soldiers in the theater of war, every level of capability you might ever imagine. And there's actually someone in charge, the Secretary of Defense. There's a bunch of large and small companies that build the military whatever they need, right?
Correct.
In the private sector, we kind of really don't have that in earnest at where it needs to be. So the 2 million officers and guards, don't have one person in charge, risk capital, 3 dozen companies willing to build whatever they need on our own soil. And that's kind of what we've been really focused on at Knightscope, is to build them some tools for them to actually do their jobs, no different than the story you were just going down.
So with Nightscope, was it one of those, like, you know, that light bulb that pops up on top of your head? Was it an epiphany? Was it a bunch of thoughts that you had that led to it? What was kind of the origin of the origin, if you will?
I think all of the above. I think it was like, okay, we need to build some tools. Horrific things keep happening. The country's not set up to fix the problem. And therein lies the frustration and the opportunity. And it was like, okay, how can we give them eyes and ears for them to do their job? How can we automate some of this stuff so that we have enough officers and guards to do what they really need to do? Maybe a little math for the audience, but there's a million guards and a million officers, plus or minus, but they're running 24/7. So you can't triple shift a human. So at any given time, there's only 500,000 people trying to secure 300 million people across 50 states. Like, to put in perspective, there's 70 million cameras in the US. Like, you just don't have enough humans to do the job. And it shows in the numbers. I mean, go look at the FBI crime clock. It's horrifying. And so I think it was one thing on top of another. It's like a crazy intersection of electric vehicles, autonomy, robotics, and AI. Like, can you grab the most difficult technologies and see if we can integrate them all into something that could actually be useful?
Well, from my understanding, I mean, you guys started what, in 13?
April of 2013.
April of 2013. So almost a decade. Um, this has always, Bill, this has always been a problem, always. And it has been significantly exacerbated by the fact that this country is facing a huge labor shortage. And it's not a glamorous job in many aspects because 99.9% of the time, nothing really happens. So I don't want to say it's demeaning. It's not. I think it's civic pride. I think it's a very important task to do well. But my stance is this is not going to be an area where they're going to have significant growth on the labor side. Okay, because in many aspects it's just um,
But they
how
can't fill the jobs, Chris. I mean, it's literally on the security side of things, it's 100 to 400% employee turnover rates. That's worse than the fast food industry. Like, you get a new guard every 3 months because you can't keep the person in the job.
So I knew it was bad in September 2020. Is it significantly worse now in January of 22? It is. So I'm almost feeling that your solution is just one of those things where guys are just going to have to convert because they can't get the humans necessary.
Yep. And at some point, like, if something's working, like, you got actual crime fighting wins. If you go to Knightscope.com, just go to the crime page. There's like a long list of all. So you've got a technology that's working, and you keep saying that our people are our most important asset. Really?
Correct.
Then why is it that you're not using the most advanced technology to keep them secure, right? At some point, it becomes really difficult conversation to have, which is, you don't want to pay $7 an hour to properly secure this facility? I mean, really?
Right. But and I apologize. I went ahead a little bit. So when you guys started this, I'm assuming it was just you. Who else was part of that
No,
founding?
I'm very proud to say that the management team that's in place now at Knightscope is the management team that started the company. So
Wow.
Stacy Stevens, who's our chief client officer, ex law enforcement. Mercedes Soria is a award-winning technologist, ex Deloitte. Our chief design officer, Aaron Lenhart. And most recently, we added our awesome CFO, Mallory Burek, and our general counsel, Pete Weinberg.
When you're starting, this is a completely new category, okay? Because no one was thinking of this stuff. And in many ways, I still think that in terms of global, tackling this problem, we're way behind. But this crew, were these people friends of yours? Were there acquaintances? Were they family members? What was it where it's like, I'm going to do this, but I need a team to build it?
We had worked together in the prior company, and we're not done yet.
I,
We said we're going to go do something, and kind of whatever it takes. We may take a different path to get to the end goal, but we're not letting this go. And I think people now realize that we're not kidding around, and we're going to force either the transaction to happen, which we've done, or force the outcome to happen.
how long was it from the time that you designed that from the time you had a thought in your head to the time that you had a design on paper to the actual robot? How long did that take you guys?
With I'll put a footnote at the end. So we started April of 13, and for the Star Wars fans out there, we put the first one in the real world with an actual client,
Pay for
May
it?
the 4th, 2015.
Okay.
Um, That said, that was one of the most miserable prototypes you've ever seen. I mean, it worked, but it didn't work. I mean, it was freaking bloody painful.
See, this is what I love talking about because when you were doing it, it wasn't funny. But now that you've gotten past that goal, there could be there. I'm hoping there was some humor in this. So I think that you look as someone who had a dad as an engineer, okay, who became a glorified event planner in many aspects, building something from nothing, let alone in a category that has never existed, is almost damn near impossible.
Yep.
So I'm assuming you did everything that you learned from Ford and all the stuff that you read, and I mean to kind of build this thing. What was that first product called? And if I may ask, what were the biggest problems with it after you designed and built it?
Well, it was the Knightscope K5 and still is the Knightscope K5. Version 1.0, we couldn't, that first year, no one would write us a check. It was like, you guys are out of your freaking mind. This will never work. Go away. So it took me 364 days to raise the seed round because no one would want to write a check. And we're just trying to raise $1 million to just get going and like couldn't get anything done. So we built the first one, and version 1.0 was not autonomous. We had to remote control this thing. Everyone else had the wow factor is like really cool, but I knew that we're just remote controlling this thing. The 2.0 was what we put out in the field, and what was wrong with it?
By the way,
Every 3 or 4 hours, something would break. How about that?
well, no, Bill, I was going to ask, who was your first client for that first version?
It was a mall. It was a mall.
Oh, it was a mall. Okay.
And funny story. So no one's ever done this before in the history of mankind, right? So when we got the first one kind of working, we would put it outside at Knightscope headquarters, and then we're like, will someone take it? What happens if it breaks or whatever? So we would literally sleep at the office. Like the whole company were like, all right, you get the 10 p.m. to 2 a.m., you get the 2 a.m. to 4 a.m. shift. I mean, we're all comatose. And then when we put it at the mall, we couldn't, we were scared to leave it there. So we had a van. So now the team's sleeping in the van, watching the robot and making sure it's like not going to disappear or whatever. It was awful. And that was for 4 months. Someone on the team or the whole company did an all-nighter. And it was that bad.
So I know that there was someone on the team who woke up at the butt crack of dawn and thought there must be a better way. So let's just put it this way: your one working robot was the only one that you had, and you had to provide 24/7 surveillance.
Oh yeah. It was awful. It was awful.
The irony of that is palpable. So during this, after this mall, during this creation, what were kind of some of the innovations that were created by Knightscope? In the sense that, okay, no one has ever seen this before. We have one customer. We're gonna have to kind of advance the model.
I mean, it seems silly now, but like most people will focus on the robot, and then if you can actually get data out of it and look at it on your computer at home, wow, cool! I can see what's going on over there. I mean, it seems silly now, but at the time it was awesome. I think one of the things that I'm glad that a lot of the sensing capabilities have improved, but what I guess a funny story. So the machines operate like a self-driving car, right? And they use lasers and sonar and a bunch of crazy software and accelerometers to be able to navigate stuff. And so we would map the parking lot, for example, and there's all these cars here. So at the time, the sensors we were using, they were only, I don't know, 10, 50 meters or something like that. And it was fine because the machines could see the cars and like, okay, I know where I am, where I can keep going. But Chris, the mall closes at 10 p.m. and all the cars disappear. and your lasers can't see anything. You're in the freaking desert. And then we're like, okay, now how are we going to fix this?
I don't, does the robot shut down? Does it self-destruct? Does it go to a designated place? That's
It
actually,
gets delocalized, which it means it gets lost. No good.
yeah. So, but that's insane. I mean, a lot of the things that you learned is ultimately by going out in the real world and doing it.
Or the other one was the Wi-Fi wasn't working, or they didn't have robust Wi-Fi outdoors, so we like kludged together a cellular solution, and then Sprint calls us up because we were using so much data. They're like, "Do you guys realize that you are the largest data consumer across the entire United States this month?" It's like,
I hope you had an unlimited plan.
no.
That's insane. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
so, but was there ever a time, kind of in the early days, that you just wanted to call it quits, where this is not going to work? I mean, because think about all the things that can happen to you early on, and the number one thing is you typically run out of money,
Yep.
or you lose key staff, which is another big one, or the product or service just sucks. What were kind of some of
Or
those
all of those, Chris, at the same time.
at the same time? Right. So what was it that kind of kept you moving forward? Was it this idea
I'm probably going to get in trouble for the answer, but um, I think so. We went through some pretty rough periods, like everything that you said, plus some, if not multiple times, all at the same time. Um, there's that story of Elon Musk almost losing Tesla. They're going to have 2 weeks of cash and they're going to run out, and he fixed it one time.
yeah.
I did that for 15 months.
Wow.
I did it 15 times. So, you do whatever it takes to fix the freaking problem. Haven't been backed by venture capitalists, and I know plenty of them. We have no VCs or hedge funds or PE shops on our cap table right now. Um, Almost everyone I know would have pulled the plug 3, 4, 5 times. And I think because I had control of the company and were willing to do as I often say, founders have a screw loose. You got to be willing to do the irrational, illogical, and sometimes literally stupid things to force an outcome to happen. And honestly, if we would have been backed by traditional funding, it would have been pulled, or they wouldn't have allowed me to do what I did. But.
So you never, I mean, even in the darkest of nights, you because I have it too, because in many ways I was an entrepreneur with LD Micro. For me, I was lucky because my passion became my hobby, became my work. Okay. That doesn't happen with most people. Most people work because they either have debts or they need to earn a living.
No, my wife says the easy answer, Chris, is my wife says I'm possessed. It's like, Friday nights we like to watch movies, right? And pre-COVID, we would sit in the movie theater and I'd be all excited. And I'm looking at the fonts and the cinematic treatment of the trailer. Oh, that's an interesting line. Maybe we could use that at Knightscope. Oh, that shot is really good. Maybe we could use that at Knightscope. All I'm looking at is everything is one filter. What can I do to help the company? And, people kind of like, you're out of your mind. Well, kind of what we're doing is really hard, and you have to have that either motivation, dedication, or be delusional to think that you're going to be able to will something into existence.
Well, I will tell you this. Another, prominent investor in the small cap world uses the word fanatical. And those are typically the guys that push the needle, that get shit done, that usually have, really good trajectories in their share price. I've never met Elon, but I'm pretty damn sure he's fanatical.
No, he's possessed, and he has results to show it. And probably the more humorous thing that happens with me is if you go to knightscope.com/investors, the little blue button at the bottom right, everyone thinks that on that page that's customer service. And they don't realize that it's literally me answering questions 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Pacific, 7 days a week. And it's always like, this is a bot. No, this is not a bot. This is Bill. I'm very exhausted. What is your question? How can I help? What is two plus two? What, they got to test me if it's a bot or not. And the reason I do it is because I care. And you're not going to change this country with four institutional investors sitting in the ivory tower somewhere. You're going to have to run the equivalent of a political campaign. And that's why we have the thousands and thousands of investors that we have, because we're going to have to change this from every walk of life, from every angle, from a student, a teacher, a judge, an intelligence community official, to a mayor, to whatever it is. Pretty much on our cap table, those are the folks that are on there.
So let's shift gears. What was that day or that moment like where you knew that things were looking up, or the dream was slowly, coming into realization? Was it a technological breakthrough? Was it a purchase order? Was it, a famous investor coming on board? What was it that kind of shifted gears? For me, at least at LD, 1 year we basically doubled the number of companies, and I still can't explain how that happened. It just did. That was our kind of pivotal moment where, you know,
I think it's a bunch of little things that add up. I mean, I remember being in New York pre-COVID. I'm in the car and I get a phone call from my co-founder. He's like, "We just helped a police department issue an arrest warrant for a sexual predator." What? Like, to me, it's like mind blown. Like, we're actually able to help this early. I think that crime page that's on our website, I still find fascinating that, just statistically thinking about, you said it earlier, most of the time there's nothing going on. The likelihood that we're able to help is dramatically, extremely low. I think recently, we've gotten our first two fifth-year renewals, and it's like, Jesus, we've been at this for a long time. We've been chugging. We got all kinds of problems and everything, but we have clients that renewed 5 times, 4 times, 3 times, and then have the chief of police sit in front of a city council and get a unanimous vote for a renewal for 2 years. Like, geez, I think we're making it. And then lately, I think it's just because I'm spending a lot of time on the public listing, drafting some of this stuff is just surreal, right? We got our ticker symbol, and then you're passing all these people, if you've never been through this process, is a nightmare, but there's all kinds of stuff you need to file, but you're drafting these things and it's like, geez, this is crazy. This is happening.
I no, I get it. So let's forward to kind of September of 20 when we last spoke till now. How has it been? I mean, has the business development side ultimately come to your, expectations? Has there been any technological breakthroughs? How have you kind of positioned yourself for this big moment?
I think it's blocking and tackling. I'm not the hockey stick guy. Everyone's like, where's the one pivot thing? And all of a sudden you've got Google or Facebook. I'm like, those are anomalies. This is not reality. By the way, managing this is a nightmare. So to me, we've been in the not back office, but in the background, re-architecting stuff. Not proud to say, but we kind of hacked our way here. At some point in time, you can't, there's so many band-aids you can put on something that you kind of need to start over. So in a lot of cases, we've been starting over. I think from a business development standpoint, one of the things I'm most looking forward to, we're 2 years through, halfway through a 2-year nightmare U.S. federal government cybersecurity approval process. So if everything goes well, which normally doesn't, but let's just say it does, hopefully by the end of 22, we should have an ATO or an authority to operate with the U.S. federal government. And I think that's going to be an exciting moment for us. It's going to take, time, but the opportunities now, having met with so many government officials from almost every facet of their operations, we can genuinely help, and they genuinely need I'll put it politely, the upgrade.
Well, I don't think I've ever asked you this, but I mean, because we focus so much on the States, is there an international opportunity here? Because in many parts of the world, crime is even more rampant than stateside. Is there a reason? I mean, I don't even, I mean, are you in other countries? Has that expansion taken place, or is there just so many opportunities here domestically that you haven't even thought about it?
Some people hate this answer I'm going to give you. Some people love it, but I've been consistent. The mission of the company is to secure the United States of America, and that's what we've told our 28,000 investors and what we need to focus on. I've worked on four continents. I physically know what it takes to do this. You will almost guarantee 100% chance of a BTE, or business terminating event. Um, we can go into the details, but to me, I'm not willing to add the execution risk for us to be outside the U.S. Said differently, I've told the incoming board of directors is, when we're in all 50 states and we've come to close or secured the U.S. as best we can, and we have $500 million of cash on hand, and we've got nothing else to do. Yes, we can go work on Argentina and South Africa and the UK and China and Japan, but not interested in adding that. And people get really upset with me because it's like, you turn down these tens of millions of dollars to be in the Middle East or wherever. And I'm like, yep, I work for our shareholders. I need to protect their long-term interests, no matter how cranky they or you get with me. I'm not going to add that level of risk. 95% of startups fail, and it's part of it is the CEO is not willing to say no.
No, and look, I mean, it's part of those guys like me who believe that a lot of products, I pay more to get stuff that's built in the U.S. because I feel that it makes um, you know, um, it makes a huge difference for that small company that's making it, or even that big company that's making it. Because if you don't have jobs stateside, no one can afford to buy anything. That's kind of my logic. Um, in terms of what has taken place since say summer of 20 till now, on the crime side, is there any correlation with crime rising and just people showcasing interest in Knightscope?
Yes, I think we've spent a lot more time with law enforcement agencies who are kind of stuck with resource issues, ability to patrol, and if there's a way to de-escalate a situation, can also be really helpful. I think from the labor shortage side of things, certainly we've had a lot of uptick on the casino side of things because they just literally can't fill the positions. And on residential, honestly, not we weren't really hunting there or spending too much time, but we're starting to see HOAs and apartment complexes, or someone's very 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 large estate also be clients of ours. So I think that basically anywhere indoors or outdoors you might see a security guard or an officer patrolling is an opportunity for Nightscope.
Is there a correlation between geographic areas that are facing increasing in crime and your solution?
I want to say yes and no. I mean, prior to COVID, you're looking at mostly population density as the kind of driver, because that typically, correlates with levels of crime. But I think now you have to put the overlay of the labor shortage. So now you're in non-urban areas where you still need the security footprint, but you don't have the labor available to do it. So now I think, I don't want to say evens out, but starts changing the dynamic a bit.
Did this new infrastructure or recent infrastructure bill, does that help you guys in any way?
Long term, yeah. I mean, you're gonna put in more assets that need to get secured, and you need to do it efficiently. That's why we're spending a lot of time on the FedRAMP approval process.
So on the product side, heading into 2022, do you feel that there's any milestones there that you are about to achieve? Because I'm assuming that given the fact that you are possessed or fanatical, I bet you look at all the stuff that you create and you're like, we're still in the first inning in terms of what it can be. And the analogy that I always use is Boston. I think it's Boston Dynamics, or is it Boston Robotics?
Anyways.
Well, yeah. So you look at what their first thing was, and it was like literally it couldn't even stand by itself. And then you now have a robotic dog that basically, kind of runs at 50 miles an hour and does all sorts of crazy shit. Excuse my language. But how do you feel that the product is going to evolve, this year, 5 years, 10 years down the road?
Yeah, I think part of the concern with the robotics industry and the firm that you mentioned, that firm's like 30 years old, has yet to ship a commercially viable product at scale. And I think that speaks to there's not enough roboticists in the world. There's not enough capital going into the sector, and everyone's worried about what the robots are going to do. And I mean, and I'm like, there's not enough engineers and there's not enough capital in here for you to be worried about anything that's on the Hollywood screen. Second point, I think we're in the blocking and tackling and re-engineering side of things. So we're not looking for the voila new shiny object. It's how can we make what we have better, much more robust, lower cost, more reliable, reduce the service stuff, none of the glamorous things that some folks are looking for. So blocking and tackling. I think if you have a longer term view, criminals and terrorists don't care that you secure a casino or a hospital or a school. Like, they're basically everywhere. So if you're serious about the mission, we quote unquote need to be everywhere, both indoors and outdoors. So over the next decade or two, what you need to see is form factors that cover every nook and cranny of being outdoors and indoors in every way possible to help the 2 million officers and guards. And then on a different axis is to have them see, feel, hear, and smell, and do 100 times more than a human could ever do. If you have that, and we can put 1 million of them out there, then we're going to have a chance to put a huge dent in that $2 trillion negative economic impact of crime every year.
So would you say that Knightscope is a remote security solution? How do you identify the company when people try to label you? Because I've heard all sorts of things.
We're an advanced physical security technology company. Whatever is going to help fix the damn problem is what we should be working on. I'm not a roboticist. I'm an ex-car guy. Whatever technology is going to help our clients and kind of address the issue is what we should be working on. And that's one of the things I'm kind of excited of hopefully getting through this public listing is possibly, I bought a lot of companies in my past life, and so as my CFO, hopefully there's an opportunity for us to be a little bit acquisitive to see how we can kind of ramp things up in a different way.
You feel that most of the advancement moving forward for you guys is going to be on the hardware side or the software side?
Would you ask Apple that question, or would you ask Tesla that question?
No, I wouldn't, because they've both proven that. Well, I wouldn't, because they've kind of.
That's the problem with a lot of schools and a lot of corporations. We and investors, they think about how can you be the best mechanical engineer? You need to be the best biologist. You need the best physicist. That's not how the world works. The world works as a system, right? One trick question I usually ask recruits is, if you want to build an unbelievable company, not something special, whatever, something stunning, what is the most important functional area you need to optimize? And 9 out of 10 people will pick a functional area. Finance, you have to have best customer service, you have to have the best culture, you have to have best engineers, whatever it is, and they'll rationalize why that has to be the right thing. That is not how the world works. You need to understand, no different than a Formula One race car driver, right? You're going to ask them, Chris, is the throttle more important than the steering wheel? Like, no, you need both things to work together. And that's not the type of folks and business people or technical people that we breed.
But the reason I asked this question is that you and I know that 50 years from now, my biggest dream in my life is that 100 years from now, they're still doing the LD Micro Conference. But by then, it's the Davos of small cap. As in, they look back and you have like that portrait of Chris Lahiji, like looking at where you see the fire.
Hold that right there.
The fires of the Getty. It's like us canceling the conference. Like
mask.
Yeah, right. The masks. All the crap that I've been through in the last 10 years. Like, what would Chris Lahiji do? It's like, what would Bill do? So the reason I asked that is because in conferences, there's not going to be that much change in 50 years time or 100 years time. Okay. Maybe the devices will be different. You'll have some AR, VR, some stuff like that. But for you, it's going to be very different. That's why I asked, because you have AI, you have these incredible materials now that can do crazy stuff, like graphene. And then you have this kind of being meshed together. And of course, it scares a lot of people. I think there's also a huge opportunity here. And that's why I asked this, because I'll never be able to kind of tap your brain.
It's gotta be, to me, it's mechanical, it's electrical, it's firmware, it's software, it's everything. Like, there's people working on this, and I'm anxious for them to pick up the pace. Like, figuratively putting a dog's nose on a chip, right?
Yeah,
That
right.
could be a game changer. Now you're going to tell me that's hardware, software, or electrical. I don't care. Neither does the client, and neither should the investors. You should focus on that functionality of what we can deliver to that client that will deliver the needed results.
So this is a perfect segue to my final question.
Uh-oh.
What does Nightscope look like 10 years from now, 25 years from now, and half a century later? In your eyes, what do you see happening?
One answer. It should look like the equivalent of a defense contractor, like a $30 billion defense contractor, but instead of focusing on the Department of Defense, we would focus on the Department of Homeland Security, Justice, the 19,000 law enforcement agencies, and 8,000 private security firms. And we should be the leading provider of technology that help protect places you live, visit, work, study, and basically have a very large technology portfolio for us to actually be able to achieve the mission. And if we're able to do that, just, if we're going to wrap this up, Chris, like, let's just say for one moment, the founder has his way and we were able to make the US the safest country in the world. Like, talk to me about property values, insurance rates, the volatility of financial markets. Are we arguing about the municipality's budget? Are you arguing about education? You're not wasting any time or money on that stuff, right? You would actually have a place where a flood of people and capital want to be there because you created an environment where you can actually go to work and go to school without having the risk of being shot or killed.
And Bill, I want to kind of say this. I think the reason why the US is the most successful country in the world is because of people like you who always dream big. My mom is obsessed with Tom Ford. I'm not, but I'm always fascinated with what my mom loves. And she said, just watch some of his interviews. And besides having perfect posture, Tom Ford, perfect posture, by the way, perfect.
Now I got to sit up straight.
Yeah, besides having perfect posture, he said something that those who truly achieve are the ones that never look back and say, man, you know what, we did something, because there's always something in front of them. And I feel that you are one of those guys.
I appreciate
Every now and then I look back, it's like, oh, that was cool, but you move forward, you move ahead. So the basis is whatever problem that you tackle, just know that you have our utmost respect. And again, from someone who has seen this thing, firsthand, it's like, what the hell is that? To, this is a big problem. We need to fix it. Nightscope can be a part of that solution. I commend you. Where can people go to learn more about the company?
Well, just go to knightscope.com and then hopefully we get this public listing done and the ticker symbol will be KSCP. And as I like to say, long Knightscope and short the criminals.
And look, I also wanted to add that if you open the bell, can you please invite me so that I can like dress up in some type of because you guys don't actually have a mascot. I don't know if you.
Are you applying to be our mascot, Chris?
As long as I can be fully.
I'm sending out a press release in the morning, Chris. We'll put your mug on it.
Look, I'll be your mascot as long as I can be fully covered where no one will know who is it. That's the being a good mascot. Bill, thank you again. Good luck with
Thank you. We'll need it. This is not easy, but we made some progress.
And I will be in tune, and I will, of course, see you on the other side.
All
Thank
right.
you.
See you on the other side. Thanks, Chris. Bye bye.